Mr. Derek Veenhoff, who's better known as Deek.
Drinking liquor with DJ Deek, we out laughing.
Yo, Deek.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Deekast, episode 77. I'm with Abhijit Chanda today from India. How are you doing, Abhijit?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Abhijit is a skeptic blogger and a podcaster based in India. He's also a DJ and musician, or part-time, used to dabble. I want to ask you a lot about that. He hosts the Rationable Podcast, which can be found at berationable.com. Is rationable a word, or did you make that up?
I found it on one website, like I think it was Free Dictionary, where it's this archaic word which apparently means a cross between reasonable and rational. I haven't found it on any other website, but so I'm claiming it for myself. Unfortunately, the domain's been taken as well, like just rationable.com, so it had to be rationable. I don't know who figured that one out.
Yeah, no, it's catchy. It works. I think it works.
Yeah.
So
plus, it also means being able to ration out things in small portions. So I guess
there you go, which is important
too.
So, what kind of, you mentioned just before we started recording a little bit of the music you're into, but you play bass. Is that also correct?
Yep, that's my bass right there.
There you go. So, what kind of tunes? You cover tunes and stuff, or?
I'm just gonna adjust this a bit. So I was in a band. Well, I still am kind of in a band. Like we've kind of come together, broken up, and tried different things. We used to play a lot of grunge, alt metal kind of stuff. And now we've kind of shifted into more post-rock, ambient kind of stuff. Like I guess we're getting older, I guess.
Yeah.
And and as a DJ, I play usually retro, disco, funk, stuff from the 60s, 70s, 80s, mostly. A little bit of the 90s as well, a little classic rock as well, if I get the chance. But yeah, so that's my DJ thing, and I've got some bass happening, and now we're all kind of sitting in our homes, so we just kind of record a layer, and I've been learning programmed drumming, so I've been putting that in, and I'm sending recordings out to my bandmates, and they record a layer here and record a layer there, and we kind of put it all together.
Oh, it's fun. So you mentioned the lockdown. So what stage is India? Well, I'm assuming there's different stages in different areas, but how is India doing? I know there's about 1 million cases, but they do have 1.3 billion people, so that's not that many.
Yeah, I mean, total number versus the number of the population, not too bad. Too bad. I mean, 1 million's like, it's nothing. but there's been a lot of controversy about this, because we've been locked down since March, the day after my birthday, pretty much.
Okay.
Which was on the 22nd. And we haven't, and then we started unlocking like a little bit over a month ago, I think almost 2 months. And I don't know why, because the numbers were still going up. We still haven't reached the peak of the first wave. And we started unlocking. So now pretty much everything's back to normal. I don't know how we've done that or why we've done that. It's nice because now I can shop on Amazon, but other than that, in the big scheme of things, it's really not a good idea. And we are still rising steadily. We have got, bigger and bigger numbers coming almost every day. And it's not looking good right now. The problem is that the government is now saying that because we only have about 25,000 deaths, which is not bad, I guess.
Yeah.
Or at least that have been reported and have been made public. Now, there are conspiracy theories, and I'm not one to subscribe to conspiracy theories, but the lack of reliability of those numbers is deeply troubling. Like, I don't know. It doesn't seem realistic when you have first world countries with much more advanced medical systems and infrastructure than we do. They've got higher numbers than we have. And I don't know how we're managing, because our whole medical infrastructure is
right. So maybe other
painfully
than
inadequate.
if it's not a conspiracy, maybe it's just bad reporting or different issues like that, like bad keeping of the
Yeah, it
data,
could be a
perhaps.
variety of things.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, because there have been we only have hypotheses right now. We only have conjecture, because we don't really know how the numbers are coming in, because the reporting is a problem, because I don't think there's a consistent reporting infrastructure as far as all the hospitals that are treating COVID patients. The doctors are also, I have heard, now this is of course hearsay, so it's also not reliable information, that some doctors have been asked to write death certificates which don't claim COVID deaths. Also, there are a lot of India, I think a majority of India is out of reach of major hospitals, and a lot of people living in the deep rural states and areas are miles away, many miles away from the nearest medical facilities that could be available to them. So there could be people out there who are sick, who are very unwell, who might have died, who haven't even heard of, because we don't know if they've even had COVID in the first place. Our testing is also woefully inadequate, so we don't really have real numbers as far as tests are concerned either, because they just
Yeah.
testing
It's a
enough
tough
people.
thing to, and I know everybody's debating about these topics currently. What it doesn't matter what country you're from, really, but especially in the United States as well, of course, just because of all the political hubbub there. But it seems like one of those things where we're going to have to look back on this a couple years in the future to really get the full story, because it's hard to keep track of all this stuff as it comes out, and it's happening in real time, right? And it's a
Yeah,
new thing.
absolutely.
It's a new pandemic, so we're dealing with just like how everybody is up in arms about the WHO and the information that comes out, and whether it's true or false, and that they contradict themselves sometimes. But I mean, we as humans are trying our best with the knowledge that we have. So there's going to be some issues along the way, but it's a move. It's discovering day by day the data and analyzing it, of course.
Exactly. That's the important bit. We really, like, nobody on this planet really knows how to deal with this, because most of us have never experienced a pandemic at this scale before. I mean, the very few were around for the 1918 pandemic.
Yeah.
So we honestly, and back then, of course, the medical infrastructure, the scientific knowledge that the human race had as a collective was very, very, it was minuscule compared to what we know now and how we can deal with things, and we are still screwed.
Yes, and the
So
communication is obviously way better than it was before. I mean, we have doctors from different countries that are able to Skype with each other and share information as it comes out and what's happening in their countries. So
exactly.
So your origin story. We need to know more about this guy. I'm going to quote you first from your website. I've spent most of my life being a gullible, nerdy, sci-fi loving kid, allowing bad ideas and bullshit to permeate my worldview. I wasn't fanatical about anything, but I believed anything was possible. I can kind of relate to that quote. So can you tell us more about why or what type of stuff you believed and how you switched that around?
Well, I've been very fortunate to have been brought up in a house filled with books. Like, we've had books all over the place, and a huge variety of books as well. I mean, including Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. I've had books on human evolution, books on human mythology. Well, obviously, which other species has mythology? And about animals. And I've always had an interest in biology and animals and science. I remember watching Carl Sagan's Cosmos when it used to come out on our national television broadcast system, Doordarshan, back when I was 7 or something. And so I remember watching that. I remember I bought the book when I was old enough to read thicker books. I still have it here, actually. And I bought, and I've gone through several versions of it. I downloaded illegally the pirated version of the TV show, because there was no other way to watch it back in the 90s. And then I've managed to, then of course I've watched it on whatever streaming platforms I could. So I've definitely given the Carl Sagan Foundation quite a chunk of my money. But the problem was that we also used to discuss a lot of philosophical ideas, like, maybe ancient technology. My family has always been very into homeopathy. We've had Ayurvedic medicines and preparations since we were kids. So along with all of this interesting scientific, information that we have always valued, there's also a lot of misinformation that we have just taken for granted because it's just something we've been brought up with, like it's been everywhere. So I never took any of that for granted until I started I went to the UK to study for my master's in professional writing. And I was thinking of writing a sci-fi book. So my lecturer, he said that, why don't you try writing a sci-fi book about, ancient humans who got the technology to escape the planet. They've gone to another planet and you discover new life. It's first contact, but oh my God, it's humans. It's the most, it should be the most ridiculous thing that we encounter is more humans out there.
Right.
And I said, that's true. It's a novel way to look at it, because in Star Trek, we just kind of take it for granted that, you go somewhere else, everybody looks kind of human. It's all good. So but I wanted to do like a hard sci-fi, like, something like Isaac Asimov would, or Arthur C. Clarke. Like, those guys are my heroes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to write something which is based on solid science, but maybe it exists in a gap of the unknown currently, which is where the best sci-fi is, really. And so I looked up ancient aliens, I looked up ancient technology, and I found nothing. I was like, I'm sure there was we made movies like Stargate on how the aliens came down and helped the Egyptians. There's got to be something to it.
The Nazca lines didn't do it for you? You didn't think that those Nazca lines were drawn by paint brushes from the skies or whatever?
I did. We used to discuss that guy, Eric von Daniken.
Yeah.
You had Brian Dunning on your show, and so I listened to that episode of Eric von Daniken, and it was amazing because that's exactly the kind of stuff that I'd been thinking for like the last decade. And when he started saying it, I was like, yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So that was like my first moment when I was like, okay, like I have a lot to learn. There's a lot of stuff out there which I've evidently had the wrong idea about. Then it was Richard Dawkins, and I watched a clip of his when he said homeopathy is bunk. And I was like, wait, I've been taking that stuff since I was a kid. Like my parents have been taking it. They had the little vials sitting around all over the place. And so after, like, that was when like the avalanche started, and I started listening to podcasts like The Skeptic's Guide and Skeptoid and a bunch of others. And it blew my mind. Like everything that I had thought I had believed in, or at least taken for granted that they worked, were actually bunk. And the more I learned about the skeptic movement and about how to think skeptically, the more I began to realize that a lot of the problems, I wouldn't even say a majority, but a lot of the problems in today's world of people getting conned is because there's a lack of critical thinking. That we humans don't like to think critically because it's uncomfortable. It's difficult. You have to learn new things, and you have to change your perceptions and your belief systems and kind of twist them around. So I began to realize that this was something that if I could learn, a layperson who doesn't have a science background, who is just into sci-fi, but definitely a science enthusiast, if I can figure out how to think critically, I'm sure anyone can. Like, I'm not the smartest kid on the block.
Yes.
I've felt as stupid as pretty much anyone would probably feel, probably more so at different points of time.
Right. No, that's interesting. I can relate to some of that narrative. I mean, with me, it was a lot of early 2000s YouTube documentaries and stuff like that got me as a teenager thinking, maybe George Bush had something to do with 9/11, or maybe, but then it was more of just actually learning more about geopolitics or reading more and getting a better scaffolding and overview of how the world works and what is reasonable, what is not, what is likely and what is not likely. Like, I'm open to all these possibilities of, say, alien species and that, but I just want, someone on Twitter the other day said to me, does a UFO need to land in your backyard for you to believe? I'm like, well, sort of. I just need something concrete. That's all. And those things are very elusive to find those concrete pieces of evidence.
Absolutely.
For some of these things. So speaking of India specifically, when I just mentioned like some of the things I used to believe, I also used to believe a lot in some of those guru guys like Sathya Baba and the Buddha Boy from Nepal, that documentary. I don't know if you remember that. Things like that, like Breatharians and those kind of things. And I wouldn't say, I don't want to say I believed it. I was very, very open to it. And it was also sometimes hard to find strong evidence against it, in the sense that the reportings were often disputed, or it's, not a lot of journalists really would go directly to these people other than the Buddha Boy. I think they did have a BBC documentary actually film him. Do you remember what the conclusion was with that guy? I know that he, again, speaking for a lot of these guru guys, there's a lot of abuse or rape and murder charges. There's always some things that are there. Like off the bat, they're always attention seekers, it seems, as well. But then there's always these like criminal investigations. Do you have anything to say about any of those gentlemen?
Yeah, well, as far as the Buddha Boy, or as we call him, Buddha, it's a little bit more of a punchy name, but he's supposed to be the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama, apparently. I haven't kept up with that story. I know that the Dalai Lama has for a significant period of time set up shop in India because of the whole Tibet situation. So there is, so he does stay, and I visited the stupas and the schools and stuff like that from around the areas where he has stayed. But as far as gurus and pundits, a lot of them I find to be manipulative, and well, there is contention as far as Sathya Sai Baba, who I think you were speaking about. So there might be something to that. I'm not really sure, because, well, he passed away a while back.
Well, something to that is in his like sleight of hand, or like conjuring items, or what is the because I know he had a lot of sleight of hand going on, and
yeah, he did. This is the one this is the guy with the big afro.
Yeah, really cool hair. I really liked his hair.
Yeah, for sure. But there are lots of videos out there which show very clearly how he has created, these little bits of ash from the ash pellets that he's had in his hand, that how he's so-called managed to lay a golden egg out of his mouth. There's been a lot of these videos, and everybody thinks it's a miracle, except for the people who can really look at it and, say like, okay, this guy is really, he's not up to anything good. For that matter, of course, you don't even need to do these kinds of tricks to be seen as a holy man in this country. You can just build a reputation. I know a few names are slipping by me right now, but there are definitely quite a few who haven't really done anything that fantastical to be able to, convince his followers that they're Godmen. Like, even I'm gonna have to remember this guy. Well, see,
more people having like not so much miracles, but just like philosophies that end up developing a following, but they still take advantage of people, or are still.
Yeah, exactly. So you're gonna have to excuse me 1 second. I need to look this guy up, because
look it up. I'll talk while you look it up or something. I'll plant some other ideas in your head, because as we're speaking of these guru guys, I wanted to know more about how you would describe the believers in it. Is it could be any average person, or are there religious ideological tendencies that lend themselves to belief in this, or does the religious thought makeup in India actually go against some of it, or how are those things related? Because we're talking about India, we're talking about 80% Hindu, just for people who don't know, 14% Muslim, and then there's a mix of all kinds of other religions, Christians, Sikhs, and Buddhists, and whatnot. So how do those religious thoughts link up to the idea of these gurus and the miracles and that?
Well, I just figured out who I was talking about, so I'll come back to that. But the important thing is to understand is that Hinduism is a really diverse religion. Like, it doesn't have a single book or
Doctrine
a single
or
ideology.
Yeah, right.
It is a collection of books. There are several Vedas. There's the Upanishad, there's the Bhagavad Gita, there's the Ramayana, which are all these epics and mythology and scriptures all kind of rolled into a whole series of books. So, and we have thousands of gods. And a lot of the gods are just reincarnations or different versions of one god. Like, you know, you have Durga, who is a female god, and you've got her evil alter ego called Kali, who is worshipped primarily in the Eastern India. Both of them are worshipped, but they are two different forms of the same person. So the same Brahma, who is the creator of everything, basically, of the universe, he's got several different versions and avatars. That's where the word avatar actually comes from. It comes from that Sanskrit word of the different versions of different gods, the different visages of them. So it's really hard to pin down a single ideology. Like, every village, every township, every temple has a slightly different version of Hinduism. So it's really hard to pin down what exactly the belief system has and what it holds. It really is much more than the Abrahamic religions. It's much more diversified and dependent on the people who are teaching you that religion, the priests who you follow. So almost every family has a certain priest that they go to consult, and he's been handed his hierarchy, and his heirs have been doing it for generations, and each family kind of follows that as well. So when you're getting married, you have to go to your pundit and you have to get your horoscope made, and they'll understand which star you were born under and which planet was in here and there, and come up with an entire timeline of what the best time for you to get married and what kind of person to get married to, etc., etc.
This is Vedic astrology. Is it somewhat different from the Western version of it?
It's very different. I think it's a completely different. It's a ball game altogether. Yeah, and this has really been brought down, like, traditionally for thousands of years.
Right.
So in that manner, when it comes to that, when you have these gurus who come out, there are people who believe them, there are people who don't believe them. There are people who follow them and think that they're God's own children, and there are people who don't. And
now, are they accepting of one another, or is it a big problem? Like, does it cause a lot of contention that there are believers and non-believers, or is it more of a you choose to or you choose not to?
In that way, I think Hinduism within itself is much more tolerant as far as what you believe and how you believe and who you follow. And so a lot of these gurus who have come up, who are Sadhguru, who I was talking about earlier, we have Baba Ramdev, we have Osho Rajneesh, who has made a huge impact, especially with the international audience. Sadhguru has also been followed by a lot of people. And of course, the people who the Beatles followed, and that kind of stuff. So there is a huge variety of them, and there's a huge diversity in their ideologies and what they teach. Unfortunately, most people think that even if we don't follow them, they've got to have some of that stuff right, which is where the problem happens. So you have Sadhguru, who's got a slightly Americanized accent. He's definitely spent a lot of time abroad. He's spoken all over the world. He has his own website. He's got his own merchandise. He's got his own Ayurvedic treatments and, nonsense cures. But when it comes to certain philosophical things within life, he makes sense. Like Osho Rajneesh, he made sense with a lot of things that he said. these are not things that are revolutionary by any means. If you think about it for 5 minutes, you probably come up with the same solution. But if he comes up with that before his followers do, then obviously, God told him.
Oh yeah, and that describes me as a teenager, just getting into Eastern philosophy. Where a lot of people have this in the West. They discover Alan Watts, or they discover the Dalai Lama, or Krishnamurti as example. Jiddu Krishnamurti,
Yeah.
not UG Krishnamurti. I'll make that very clear. That I know they had a rivalry in that, but I was on the Jiddu side. So rest in peace to both of them. I guess they're both now gone, but. That is interesting that, Krishnamurti, as one example, was someone who was called a guru, but he denied those claims and said, just call me the speaker, just listen to what I'm saying and see if it agrees with you. And I don't think he, for example, had too much controversy as far as manipulating people and that kind of thing. So that was good. Also, this was a confusing thing for me to learn today when I was researching some of this stuff, is that there was this gentleman who was killed in 2013 he was murdered by, I don't know who, some men on motorbikes, and he was an anti-superstition activist, and his name was Narendra Dabholkar. Is that how you say it? And so he was murdered in 2013, and I guess maybe you could tell us a little bit more about him. But I was confused to learn that there's another gentleman named Narendra who is also a popular rationalist and skeptic who has not been killed, but he has been attacked, or his brake lines were cut, he said. And so maybe that's a testament to, again, how many people are in India that names obviously overlap sometimes.
Our prime minister's name is Narendra. So,
okay, there you go. There you go. But so what can you tell us about the gentleman who was unfortunately killed in 2013? Was he popular? Was he...
Well, he was definitely quite a pioneer when it comes to the skeptic movement, or as Indians prefer to refer to it, the rationalist movement. So he has an organization which is at this point of time trying to do a lot of activism and get laws passed to protect people from things like black magic and harmful superstition. In fact, I think I'm not too well versed with this person's work, but I do know that there's a Dr. Shantanu Abhyankar, who I've also interviewed for my podcast, who actually works in that organization. And most recently, I met Dr. Abhyankar when he was presenting a white paper at CSICon in Vegas in 2018. And I realized that they had done enough work to be able to push the Maharashtrian legislature. So Maharashtra is a state in Western India. So the Maharashtrian government had passed a legislation protecting people from harmful superstition and black magic practices and harmful rituals, so to speak, which can be used against widows, which can be used in a variety of ways to take advantage of people and suck money out of them, or at least cause trauma in some way, shape, or form. How much that law has been implemented is, of course, questionable, but the very movement that they have managed to get a law passed to protect people and give them a way to fight back against these superstitious practices was groundbreaking. So this gentleman was intrinsically involved, integrally involved in this movement in fighting against those who promoted black magic and used rituals of a variety of sorts to manipulate people. And that is why he apparently pissed off some rather dangerous people who were obviously benefiting greatly from the superstitions they were peddling and the rituals they were using to manipulate people, and had to pay the ultimate price for it. There's another gentleman whose, again, name is not coming on
it's
me.
Probably Narendra. It's probably Narendra.
It could be. I think he was interviewed by Seth Andrews on the Thinking Atheist podcast quite a while back, actually. He is a gentleman who also has received death threats to the point where now he's had to take asylum, I think in Norway,
Wow.
because there was apparently the statue of Mary somewhere in Kerala, which is one of the southernmost states in the country. And Mary was crying tears of blood.
Okay, this is different
And
from the
it
Jesus
was-
statue that was crying water, because there's another incident. Maybe I'm confusing two things, but so this was a Mary when a crying blood thing.
I think this was Mary crying tears of blood.
Okay, could be.
I could have had it slightly mixed up. Either way, the point is that they found, I mean, it was a miracle. It was declared a miracle by the Vatican, even, I think. It was a Catholic Church, and there was a lot of ruckus. But then there was an investigation brought in to see what exactly was going on. And they found that there was a sewage line leaking behind the statue, and the sewage had leaked through the statue and had come out at the thinnest point in the plaster, which was around the eyes.
Yep.
And that was what was dripping down, and people were kissing it, people were putting it on their faces. And this guy put out a health hazard saying, you guys, this is good, this could be dangerous, this could lead to, people getting sick, people dying, whatever it is. It needs to be corrected, and it needs to be cleaned up, and you can't let people in there. And he exposed it. Obviously, the Catholic Church was not happy about that, especially the Indian ones. And he started receiving death threats. He started receiving all sorts of other threats and curses. You know how it is, until it came to the point where he just didn't feel safe in this country anymore, and he had to leave. He had to take asylum. So when it comes to pushback against rationalism, yes, in India, it can be quite extreme. Like when we look at, more orthodox Islamic countries, like in Tunisia, there was a lady who apparently mocked the Quran and has now been sentenced to jail. When we talk about things like that, and we reprimand Islamic, orthodox countries for allowing these kinds of blasphemy laws to exist.
Yeah.
But we are not much better than that. We might not have blasphemy laws, but we have lynching, we have assassinations, it happens all the time. We have and even more recently, especially when soon after Narendra Modi came into power, he banned the sale of he banned the slaughter of cows, basically, across the country, with the only exception of serving beef, and that too only in high-end restaurants, etc.
Mm.
And it came to a point because whenever there'd be Muslims, because the Muslim people in India, they don't mind eating beef. In fact, most of the country eats beef. Even in the South, you have Hindus who have no problem eating beef.
Mm.
You have in the Northeast, where you have people who are also Hindus who have no problem in eating beef. So, but if in a more orthodox, and especially a place which has more following of Prime Minister Modi, people actually would suspect a person of having killed a cow, no evidence, no actual meat involved, and would just go to his house and lynch him and kill him. And it's happened multiple times. This has happened several times over the last several years. There's been a lot of communal disharmony when it comes to especially extremist Hinduism in this country at this point of time. And the fervor of this extremism, and it's now, of course, become synonymous with nationalism, because if you're not Hindu, then you're not a nationalist. And it's gotten really out of control now. So it's gotten even worse.
Now, are you also an atheist, or do you have any opinion on religious belief, or are you religious yourself?
I'm not religious at all, evidently. And I am an atheist. For most of my life, I've kind of considered myself an agnostic,
Right?
Because my family has I know the whole, the nuances of the word atheist and the word agnostic, and how they can,
Gets in the weeds. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So I would call myself an agnostic atheist to go really, use the words properly, but I'm just going with the common uses of those words.
Yeah.
because my family is from a reformist, like they belong to a reformist sect of Hinduism, which was started by a gentleman called Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who saw a lot of the harmful ritualism and practices that Hindus were carrying on, especially, I mean, I think this is around the 1700s, 1800s. And he did a lot of work to try and counter it. So there's a practice called sati, where a widowed bride would have to sit on the funeral pyre or lie on the funeral pyre of her husband and be burnt with him.
Yeah, it doesn't seem
alive.
very logical. Doesn't seem helpful to anybody.
It was, I know, and I'm sure it still happens in our country, but it was thanks to him that he got the British to push the legislation to make it illegal, and has been illegal ever since. He was in, he had read a variety of religious books. He'd read the Quran, he'd read the Bible, he'd read Buddhist texts, he'd read the Quran. I said that before.
He
Torah,
read it twice.
especially.
He read it twice.
He probably read it several times. So he knew, he had learned Arabic, and he'd read it in the original text. I think he even learned Aramaic and probably read the Bible in its original form as well. And he formed this religious reformist sect out of that, taking all the good bits from the different religions and from Hinduism as well, and discarding things like casteism, idol worship, rituals of any sort. So now my family's been pretty liberal. We don't have any particular, festivals that we celebrate. We just we celebrate whatever festivals we encounter from whichever religion that we find to be fun. So we celebrate Diwali and Holi and Christmas and everything else.
Sure. So pretty inclusive. That's you mentioned the caste system. Is that, I know that's has a long history, but is it still pervasive, or is it more in certain areas, or is it embedded into the country at all still, or?
The best way to say it's very much like institutionalized racism. It's become institutionalized.
I was going to say, maybe that. I could see that explanation. Okay.
So this is still widely prevalent across the country. People like to think that it's gone away, but it's just gone deeper into a person's psyche. Like most of my life, I haven't encountered it, and a lot of people don't until they need to get married. Now, all of a sudden, is the woman or the man you want to marry, which caste is he from? And that is a problem with a lot of people, because if not of the same caste, they probably call it off. And if he's one of the lowest castes, which are called Dalits, the untouchables, then it's totally off. So that system still prevails across the country in almost every way that we look at it. I mean, even like the Dalits, the untouchables, are the ones who are supposed to handle dead bodies, who are supposed to handle sewage and cleaning up, etc. And nobody else is willing to do such things. And nobody is willing to they're just stuck in that, because it's very hard for them to rise out of that and be included in regular society. There are lots of cases where that has happened, where a lot of Dalits have, they've moved to schools and colleges, and they've studied their whole lives, and they've gotten degrees, and they've started working. But as soon as somebody finds out that they're from that lower caste, they are suddenly shunned. They are ignored. They lose opportunities. It's intrinsic. It's built into the system.
Now, this just shows this just shows my ignorance or lack of education. But how does one determine? How do you find out which caste somebody is from? How is that determined?
It's often related to your last name.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of the last names in India are caste based. So certain last names are only Brahmin, certain last names are only Kshatriya, which is the warrior class. And so the Dalits also have a group of last names which claim it. So
right. So like you said, through marriage, that's how that has stayed.
And it's hereditary. So your kids will be the same caste as you and for forever and ever. So there's really no escaping from it. Even if you're educated, even if you're capable of doing other things, a majority of people will just ignore it and just see you for the caste you belong to, and will just ignore any attempts that you try to make to get ahead in life.
Wow.
So it is still a very big problem.
Well, let's jump around a little bit. How about now back to scientific stuff. You're also into fitness and exercise, and on your website you mentioned that you have a lot of good resources on your website, and things that have changed your mind. What are some things in the fitness world and exercise world that you've had to debunk for yourself?
Oh, keto.
Keto, yeah.
It was. I think it was. I honestly, for most of my life, and I have a horrible willpower, and I still have a lot of weight that I need to lose, which I still haven't managed to do. So, but for the longest time, I didn't really know what to do. I thought you just have to work out, and that's pretty much it. And there was a time when I was younger, around my early 20s, when I used to work out 6 days a week because I had nothing else to do. I lost a lot of weight. I was pretty fit. Things looked up. Then I got a job, and everything went down the drain. So much later, when I moved to the UK, this friend of mine told me about this book called The 4-Hour Body by Timothy Ferriss.
Yep.
And which was very intriguing. And on the whole, it makes sense. Like, the 4-hour body can work. I'm not saying it doesn't. But it also instilled that idea that eating carbs or white carbs is what made you fat. And that kind of stuck with me. I tried that 4-hour body diet for a while. I couldn't really sustain it because it gets really expensive when you're avoiding the stuff which is the cheapest, like bread, and pasta, which you can get pounds of and tons of for really cheap.
Yep.
So when you're avoiding that, everything else is expensive by default. Everything else is more expensive than that. So I couldn't maintain it, but that idea stuck in my head. So when I came back to India and I started, just getting along in life, I thought I'd start looking it up, and I started looking at the specific claims in that book, and it kind of connected with the whole keto diet idea. And I started looking that up. And the more I looked, the more I found that there was a lot of science to prove, to support it. There was an article in the Scientific American about how butter isn't that bad for you. There was an article in Time magazine about, butter and eating fat is not as bad for you as everybody thought. So all these ideas were coming out around that time. And everywhere I looked, and I've got myself into a little bit of a Google bubble where I would just see just keto everywhere, that this is the best way to eat. And this kept feeding on itself. So I was like, fine, you know what? I don't want to do full keto because I don't like it. But I want to have 1 0-carb meal a day, and hopefully that'll cut down my whole carb intake, and maybe I'll lose a little weight. Maybe I did. But the thing is, there was something just didn't jive with me, and I don't know why that was. But it taught me an important lesson, that every week I would do a dedicated search to look for evidence against keto. I was like, what is wrong with keto? 5 bad things about keto. I just put in these random searches in Google and see what I came up with. And that is around when I got into audiobooks, and I discovered this book called Nutrition Made Simple. And it was one of those great courses on Audible. And I was like, oh, finally, like, this is done by a registered dietitian. This has got a lot of science. It's all science-based. Now I'm going to know. Out of that whole book of some 40 odd lectures, she dedicated 5 minutes to keto as one of the diets. I was like, that's damn weird. But then I learned about carbs and proteins and everything and put together. And then I started looking for podcasts because I was like, something to get out of the Google bubble, right? Somehow or the other. And I started looking for podcasts, and I was looking for nutrition science podcasts. And I found BioLane's, the Physique Science There's a Physique Science podcast by Lane Norton. And that had a continuous conversation every single week about nutrition science and how it can be used to lose weight and gain muscle, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I learned about flexible dieting and counting macros and stuff like that. So that was a revelation that finally snapped me out of my whole keto thing. And I was like, great, now I know where the science really is, instead of all the the pages that I'd keep getting sent to with dietdoctor.com or Mark Apple or something.
As far as keto and fad diets, I mean, to me and my fiance, we have this discussion often because she studied nutrition and wellness recently and just graduated, and she is kind of into this stuff, and she's had her own diet issues as far as digestion and that kind of thing. And so she tried the homeopathy type remedies. I forget exactly which ones she had tried, but these things she was taking, and they seemed to make the symptoms worse. And it was this thing where we were thinking you're going to get over this hump and then it would be better. And then she kind of just dropped all the medications and went with her own gut feeling, pardon the pun, that was just, let me just eat what I feel like eating, sort of not overthink it and get hyper obsessed with every little detail about diet. And sort of magically her symptoms went away. And this happened about a year and a half ago. So she's been fine ever since. And so it's just an interesting thing that I'll probably actually have her on and we'll talk about it a bit, because
you should.
We just talk about, every diet that seems to come along, these fad diets, keto turned out to kind of just be one of them. And maybe it works for an individual that has a certain issue, but it became this thing that everybody was spitting out. And even people that were on keto were like putting sugar in their coffee. Yeah, I'm on keto now. And like, it just became this fad. But that's interesting. And I think our little conclusion that me and her have is, I think it's up to the individual, and you have to determine what works for you. There's no one size fits all solution, but everybody seems to have some sort of agenda when they're trying to get you to read a book or listen to something or buy some product, whatever it is. But what about the whole demonizing of meat thing? I know you had a little one episode about that too. The thing they always talk about is barbecuing meat. That charring is what has the cancer in it, so don't char your meat. Is this one of those correlation causation things too with meat and cancer?
There are carcinogenic compounds in charred meat and in processed meat and in cured meat like bacon and ham. And there are carcinogens, but you're not supposed to have this all day, every day. You have it on occasion. That's what it's there for. It's a treat. So you should treat it like one. And I know I think it was the WHO that put it up on this list of carcinogenic foods or items that you consume, along with cigarettes. Oh my God! Like, people went nuts about that, and that's what the primary response was, because if you eat a normal, healthy amount of meat, cooked healthfully and tastefully as they usually are, you can have it in a casserole or in a bake or in a stew or something of that sort, or in India you have it in curries. It's fine. You have your veggies along with it, and a lot of it counters it, because a lot of vegetables have nutrients that fight cancer. And if you're eating, and everything can cause cancer at some point of time, there's no way that you can avoid it. I mean, you'd end up eating absolutely nothing if you're trying to avoid cancer, because sometimes cancer just isn't connected with food. Sometimes it's connected with certain things in food.
Right.
You never know, really. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it.
Well, Dr. Sean Baker would have something to say about this, who has also been on my show, is the carnivore diet guy.
Oh,
of course. So he, and hey, if I could do, I'm a very big meat eater, and I don't tend to like fruit or veggies. Veggies I will eat over fruit. Fruit I'm really never really. I
can relate to that.
Yeah, but I sometimes think I could be, if I had the money, I could be a steak and eggs guy every meal of the day. But I'm no doctor or scientist, and I don't know the real effects that has. But I know there's a lot of people who argue against or rather for the carnivore diet. And again, maybe that's a fad or a sort of a shtick or something that certain people just, it works for them. And
Yeah.
I guess we'll have to track
But the thing is,
Dr. Baker, see if he gets cancer. That's the whole thing. So,
and see, it's not that just meat causes cancer. As I said, like there are multiple triggers to it. Cancer is a huge group of diseases that can be cured, well, not cured, but can be cured. Ugh, come on. Caused by multiple things. And it's not just food. So I'm not just saying, I mean, if you want to have like a full meat diet all the time, go for it. But there is a point where your palate will get very tired of that really quickly. And you really crave, like when I was doing this very low, no white carb diet, I would have sleepless nights dreaming of, well, I don't have sleepless night dreaming, but I'd lie awake thinking of bread, like what I would do for a sandwich right now.
Yeah.
Like just a slice of bread with some butter on it. I would kill for that.
Yeah.
And I never thought of bread like that before. Like I was
because it's so, you're so used to it. Yeah. What about, go ahead.
No, so everything has got its place in your diet. Like there's nutrition in fruits and veggies that you will not get from meat, no matter how much meat you eat. And there is stuff in fruits and veggies which is very hard to replace meat with. I mean, replace meat with, yes. So, I mean, there's plenty of protein in a lot of vegetarian protein sources, but they aren't the same as the ones that you get in meat, and they take longer to process, and you have to eat much larger quantities of that. If you're like a bodybuilder and you need to take more, consume more protein for that purpose.
Yeah.
But everything's got its place. So the best thing is just do a balanced diet. If you prefer less of something, have less of that, have more of something else you prefer. But as long as you've got a nice, everything goes kind of approach,
I think it's back to the just being obsessed with it. I think we're always obsessed with optimizing our lives, and maybe that's a bit of a newer trend in the world too, is like the Tim Ferriss type of thing, like let's optimize life so we can live to 150 and all this, take whatever, find what we need to take and need to avoid to become superhuman. And maybe that's just a bit of a farce, and maybe just like there's a reason why we were born into this world with all these different foods being grown and eaten, and that's just because you got to grow and eat them. Like just eat whatever's around within reason. Take the middle way, and just not too much candy, not too much,
not too much of anything.
But speaking of all of this, what about, can we talk about boosting your immune system? And that's now a big topic, of course, with coronavirus and the diet thing and homeopathy as well. So, I'll just list a few things that, spices like cumin, coriander, turmeric. I think you had an episode talking about turmeric, detoxing, superfoods, all vitamin C, all these things, right? Now, is there, I guess the short form of the question is there a way to reliably boost your immune system by ingesting something?
Honestly, I just released an episode about this, and it's on my YouTube channel. It's also my first proper YouTube video, which I've just released. So cool. Rationable has a YouTube channel. Okay, shameless plug. And so because this is, I've been wanting to write about this for a very long time, but because of the pandemic, everybody's talking about it. This has been like the ultimate punchline for a health product is it'll boost your immune system. I've seen it on hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
Like what? So it's something that's really started getting under my skin. And so I thought I'd just write an article about it. And I just saw that Dr. Harriet Hall, who is also known as the Skepdoc, has just written an article about exactly that for the Skeptical Inquiry magazine. So, and it's very, bottom line, short answer is the best way to boost your immune system is to get vaccinated. That's it. Mm-hmm. That is the only way that you can make your immune system more resistant to diseases without getting sick.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, it's just a healthy lifestyle in a nutshell. It's getting enough sleep. It's managing your stress, not drinking too much, not smoking at all. I quit smoking 5 years ago.
Congratulations.
I drink occasionally. Thank you. And I drink occasionally. I can't give up pork or bacon, but I'm working on cutting that down. So as far as the carcinogens are concerned, not there yet. But yeah, so get enough sleep, eat well, don't drink too much, don't smoke, and just live a healthy lifestyle. Get plenty of fluids, exercise if you can. The healthier your body is, the healthier your immune system will be.
Of course.
Unfortunately, if you have a compromised immune system for whatever reason, if it's a disease, if it's an organ transplant, if you're taking it for any other condition, or if it's naturally suppressed for some reason, then no matter what you do, you can't change that, right? You just have to be more careful, and you have to hope that everybody else is vaccinated so that you don't get the diseases that you can't get vaccinated for, or that you might be more susceptible to for some reason. So it's essentially, that's it. Vaccines, and live a good life, and hope that you have a healthy immune system. And if you don't have a healthy immune system, get it checked out by a doctor. Do what he says. Do what needs to be done.
Everybody talks about, of course, zinc and vitamin C seem to be the ones that pop up a lot. But vitamin C, I mean, people can look more into this themselves. I forget the name of this book, but there's this book I heard about that just sort of debunking even the whole vitamin industry altogether. And I mean, vitamin C was good for pirates to not get scurvy. They would suck on a lime. That's why they called them limeys. They would suck on a lime, and you did that every once a month or something. You would prevent scurvy. But nowadays in our diet, I mean, things are fortified. Like foods are fortified. Well, at least speaking for the West, or developed countries, I guess. But yeah, all these different foods are fortified with things that. So, like you said, if you do get a balanced diet, you don't really need vitamins unless you have a deficiency. But deficiencies are apparently very rare, or more rare than they would have you believe.
Yeah, deficiencies are pretty rare. They don't. I mean, except for, I think vitamin D is the one thing that most people can be deficient in, especially when you're staying indoors. If you're working in an office and you're not getting enough sun, then yeah, you're not going to get much vitamin D in your system. And it's something I have been deficient in. There's something a lot of people, even in India, have been deficient in, especially because if you have dark skin, then you need more exposure to the sun to be able to get that kind of vitamin D happening, which naturally. But none of us want to be out in the sun. Indians hate the sun. We want to stay as far inside as possible, stay in the dark.
Right.
We're naturally tanned. What are you going to do? So,
but speaking of staying inside, can we talk about these Bakersfield doctors and why they? I forget their names, but I know you mentioned them too on your podcast. But that was the whole thing.
Yeah,
that was their whole thing. Is that the lockdown is bad because we're staying inside, therefore our immune system is lowered, and everybody was running with this. And I was trying to tell people, again, as a layman, not an expert. I don't think that staying inside for a month or two is going to reliably affect your immune system that much. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It's probably not going to. So I'll get to that in just a second. Sure, I just wanted to finish that point on vitamin D.
Yes.
So vitamin D is a good thing to supplement with. You should get your levels checked. Make sure that it's in a ballpark, And vitamin B12, if you're a vegetarian or if you don't have much non-vegetarian in your diet, if you have a low amount, then make sure that you get some fortified cereals or something like that and get that level maintained and checked out frequently. Other than that, you've got a varied diet, you're good to go. As far as these Bakersfield doctors is concerned, because I added that in my episode as well, just dipped into it, but there are lots of people who have done a much more extensive debunk of what they've said. And by the time I managed to get to the video, it had been deleted off YouTube. Maybe that's a good thing. Some things YouTube does is good.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I was really happy when they took that down. Yeah, and the pandemic thing they took down too, which
Yes, exactly. Thank goodness. But from the clips that I did manage to watch from other independent sources, what they were saying is that if you're staying inside, it weakens your immune system because then you're not encountering the natural diseases that you would encounter on a day-to-day basis, which it doesn't make that much sense because nobody's home is, first of all, sterile to the point of having.
I was just going to say, it's not a panic room. It's it's home with windows and doors.
Yeah, and you're ordering in veggies, and you might have a pet, and they're licking you in the face, and you have family around. Everybody's loaded with germs. It's totally fine. So that's one thing against them that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And secondly, it made me look up something called the hygiene hypothesis, which is still a hypothesis, but there is a decent amount of evidence to support it, to make it considerable in its proposition. So the hygiene hypothesis basically says that to maintain a healthy immune system, you do need to be interacting with a large number of other germs on a day-to-day basis to keep your immune system healthy, which they agree with that proposition. The problem is that if you don't encounter these germs, these pathogens on a day-to-day basis, your immune system starts looking for things to fight, and it might not find it. So instead of diminishing its function, what happens is your immune system starts attacking your own body. So this is, again, a hypothesis. There is a lot of observational data which does support it. No large-scale RCTs or anything of that sort have really been done yet, but observationally, there is a lot of reliable evidence at an epidemiological level to support this hypothesis. So the thing is, so the hypothesis is that this lack of exposure to germs and other pathogens may be the reason why in Western countries, which have much higher levels of hygiene, might be a reason why there are more allergies and autoimmune diseases which occur in these countries. Because lack of exposure to germs doesn't mean it suppresses your immune system. It makes your immune system go haywire and start attacking your own body or the things that you consume. So either way, first of all, the Bakersfield guys, they don't have any evidence to support their proposition. None whatsoever. It is a truthiness feeling, like Stephen Colbert likes to talk about truthiness.
Yes, truthiness.
So it's it has a truthy feeling to it because intrinsically, instinctively, it feels like that kind of makes sense. Except it's not supported by any evidence from there. And in fact, the evidence supports exactly the opposite.
Right. And their hair looks like from the doo-wop era from the 50s, like there's too much gel. Like I don't trust somebody with that much gel in their hair.
Ironically, I don't think they get out enough.
Exactly. This kind of maybe we could wrap things up a little bit with the anti-vax movement in general, or I wanted to ask you about Bill Gates and the whole, maybe we could quickly debunk the thing in India with the polio vaccine, where everybody says that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was kicked out of India for the kids that got, I don't even know what the claim actually is, to be fair. It's that they were paralyzed, something like that.
I'm not sure about this one. I haven't heard the story, but one thing is for sure, I know several organizations that are still working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah, it's false that they were ever kicked out. I know that much, but even that the thing was caused, that the paralysis was caused by the vaccine, I think is not factual, because I think it's just some sort of expected number. Maybe we're both talking out of school here, but it was some data issue that they used to prove that, oh, look, this polio vaccine caused this paralysis or whatever. But
there is a little bit of evidence. I mean, I've only touched this topic where the polio vaccine has a potential for actually infecting people again, even after they've had the vaccine.
It was like 1 in 2 million or something like that. Like it's very
small, so it's a very rare incident, and it usually happens in places which have very low levels of hygiene and bad sanitation and dirty water and defecation in open spaces, etc. So this does happen in certain places in Africa. In India, that's quite common, because our sanitation levels are still pretty bad on the whole, especially in rural India. So there is a lot of open defecation. There's a lot of untreated water that people are coming in contact with. People are bathing in the Yamuna River, which is right next door, which runs through my city, New Delhi. And it's basically, it's a one massive sewage line. But the problem is when you take the polio vaccine and it goes through your system and it comes out of your feces, and whatever little bit is alive has a tendency of mutating into a different strain and reinfecting people. So that is again, it is a very small, with the incidences, the number of incidences of these are very small. People are trying to find solutions towards this as well. And the numbers will continue to go down as sanitation and hygiene levels improve.
Right. So infrastructure is a big component to this then as well. I mean, India is obviously developing rapidly as far as we look at things like high-speed internet and whatnot, different things. I mean, in the next few decades, do we expect India to develop quicker and quicker?
Fingers
and
crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're optimistic about that front? Like,
well, I think as a net effect, I think we are headed in the right direction. Unfortunately, with the current government, I don't get too much into the politics, but at least with the initiatives I've seen, they say the right things. They want to do the right things, but more than actually doing them thoroughly, they are more concerned with how it looks to the rest of the world.
Wait, politicians and government? This is who you're talking
Who would have
about?
thunk it?
Wow.
So it's so like, I mean, he's talked about digital India and supporting startups, but that kind of stuff is really very superficial, because how on earth is a farmer supposed to start using a laptop or the internet? You can't expect that sort of thing to happen.
He needs a T3 connection in his backyard, and then good to go.
Yeah, he wishes. Like we barely have dial-up down there. We barely have phone lines down there. How the hell are you going to get internet?
So is this? I think I read a couple different stories of this. There's these certain really rich individuals that are contributing a lot of the cash to the capital to achieve these goals, in conjunction with government, or like, is it in the private sector? Some of the development, or
there is I mean, for example, the Ambanis, who have developed Jio, which is India's new internet service. They have done a lot of work in expanding their networks, and have, I think, for pretty much 1 year, their mobile phones, the broadband, it had 4G broadband connectivity for free.
Wow.
Like, so for a year, and that made everybody push their prices down. It changed the landscape completely. And they have managed to get a lot of connectivity to more remote places in India. There has been a lot of contributions, I think Facebook has now started contributing. Jio, like the Ambanis, have started contributing to try and get, improve the connectivity of the more remote parts of India, because there is a huge market there. Who wouldn't want to get their hands on that?
Yeah.
But there is a long way to go, because our infrastructure in rural India, and I used to work in rural marketing, at the beginning of my career about 20 years back, and especially in the really deep villages, it's hard. I don't think they still have they don't have 24-hour electricity.
Mm-hmm.
They have fridges that come with built-in batteries, like truck batteries, which come along with your fridge so that it runs when the power's gone, which is for most of the day. So it's there's a lot that needs to be done. I mean, first and foremost, they need to get sanitation sorted out. This prime minister comes in with the promise that every house is going to have a toilet. They might have, to an extent, built a large number of toilets across the country, but not necessarily with the sewage system that needs to go with it.
So again, it's more of an optics thing and less of a actual.
Exactly. Exactly. So that is a very unfortunately prevalent problem, because this is basic stuff. This is hygiene infrastructure. This is power infrastructure, water infrastructure, which every developed country has, and we've been dragging our feet on this for decades. And it's about, there's a lot has improved. I will give them that.
Yeah.
We have a long way to go, and running around playing games of this sort, it just doesn't get anyone anything.
was there, am I thinking of China or India, or maybe it happens in both, that there was some, on the societal level, they were trying to shame people, like with sign, or like they would take a photo of you if you defecated somewhere and post it up and try to deter people. But how, if that, like, they need a toilet, they need the infrastructure to, you can't just shame them. They don't have anywhere to go, right? Or
It depends. I don't know if this is in India. I do know that there were campaigns against people pissing on walls and, in the streets in India, because in the city, there are plenty of places that you can go to take a whiz, right? You can go anywhere. And most people, if you're living in a city, would probably have some sort of house with some sort of sanitation system. And unfortunately, most people just go on the walls. And there was a hilarious campaign, which I kind of support on the whole, where there were these guys who went out in a fire truck of sorts. Like, it's a truck with a huge tank of water, and would find people pissing on walls and would then hose them down. And but that's only in cities. You wouldn't want to do that in the villages, because they genuinely don't have a place to go. You have to go out in the fields or something. Like, that's a genuine problem. But in the cities, keeping things clean is kind of necessary. So.
Well, is that a good note to end on, or what do you think? Is there, so let's, I wanted to just thank you for your time again, and let's remind people where they can find your podcast. It's berationable.com. It's the Rationable Podcast, and is Twitter or anything like
and
that?
And now we have a YouTube channel, which is the Rationable YouTube channel. But you just look for Rationable on YouTube, and it's spelled the way that it sounds, as I think. Does it? Is it?
I think it is. I think, yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much again for your time, and it's very enlightening, and I'm going to be staying tuned to the podcast, and I hope all you listeners will as well.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I had a great time. Thanks. I hope we talk again soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Stay cool.
You too, man. Thank you.
Take care.